Okay, so in this SoundCloud, I'm going to be talking about labels and platforms. I decided that I'm going to do them into separate ones just so then it is easier when it comes to later on. So, first of all, we're going to talk about labels. So there are actually three major major label record companies. One is Universal, the other is Sony Music, and finally it is Warner Music. So all of these three are already pretty big in the film industry, and they've also got They've also got a lot of other other businesses within them. So they're already pretty big conglomerates. So when it comes to the major record labels, they are obviously the most common, which everybody has heard about. If that is through a subsidiary, you know what I'm trying to say, or what the large record labels are able to do is give you a big sum of money, the artist, say for example 2 million, and then they would say to the artist that they have to make a certain number of albums in a time frame. So obviously if the artist doesn't make the albums or they don't sell very well, then there's obviously going to be consequences, which end up benefiting most of the label, which isn't good, but I suppose if they're doing the artist a massive favour, if you look at it like that, it's okay, really. Anyway, so when the albums come out, which the artists have produced, they don't actually see any of the money until they have given back that 2 million to the record label company. So it actually puts it in perspective for you, because genuinely I didn't think that that's how it was working or anything like that. I thought that they would have got a percentage over time, but apparently no, the label just takes their money at the beginning, which I suppose makes sense, but then on the other hand, it does mean that you have to be quite popular, otherwise you're just not going to make any money, because they do, so it's okay. So they also always ask for 3 or 4 albums rather than like 1. This is so then they always plan to fail sales for the first 2 albums, 2 or 3. So this is so then when it comes to the 3rd album, they can really push for the sales and advertise it properly, which will then gain more popularity and then should back sell the previous 2 or 3 albums, which should also make them sell out. I think that this is a pretty interesting scenario. I genuinely found it quite interesting when I was looking all this up, but yeah. So another thing about what the major record companies are actually doing is buying out all of the competition. So obviously there are still indie companies hereabout, but most ordinary people will get into contact with these indie companies, but they're not nearly as big in the whole industry. So yeah, that is the price you have to pay for going for a indie, but then you won't have the option of becoming in debt by 2 million, which is a lot. So some of the massive labels just started in a garage and then grew bigger and bigger over time. I think that that's quite interesting to think that at the start, even the big record labels were just very small, low-key operations, and it's really interesting to see how they've grown and how they've really developed. Yeah, it's quite interesting. So all of the record companies have subsidiaries, that's what I was trying to say, of the smaller companies. So they normally do take over the indie companies and then control them like that. I'm not sure how I feel, because obviously if they leave the indie companies, it's going to leave a little bit more of a diverse range of music. But then if they don't, unfortunately, it may seem a little bit similar. However, what I have found out is that within them, each director definitely focuses on a different style themselves, which is a good thing. So that summarises the labels section for this post.